to today's Good afternoon and welcome to today's press briefing, where we will be discussing the key implications of the new minimum wage. If you're joining us online, welcome to you. Remember to like, share, and subscribe so that you can stay in tune and up to date with the official government news. Welcome as well to all in our studio who are joining us for this broadcast. For today's panel, we have the Honorable Michael Miles, the Minister of Caymanian Employment and Immigration, Mr. Lemuel Hurlston, the Chairperson and previous Chair as well of the Minimum Wage Committee, Mr. Adolphus Ledlow, the Director of the Economics and Statistics Office, and Ms. Danielle Roberts, the Acting Chief Officer for the Ministry of Caymanian Employment and Immigration. We will be hosting questions shortly, so we ask that if you do have questions, you type them in the chat, let us know, and we will get to them at the end. But at this time, I yield the mic to Minister Miles.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I'd like to thank everyone for coming today, those that sitting in the press corps and those who are online. I would also like to thank our residents who are tuning in, certainly from the Cayman Islands and overseas. I want to provide an overview of our committee findings and our government decision. If you would indulge me, I'm going to just read my statement, and then, as Elizabeth said, I'm open to asking questions after my colleagues have also got an opportunity to read their statement. As many of you are already aware, the government has announced the implementation of an increased national minimum wage, as recommended by the Minimum Wage Advisory Committee 2023. We will be proceeding with the new minimum wage of $8.75 per hour gross, which takes effect on January 1st, 2026. This updated wage floor allows months of rigorous review by the committee and reflects the government's commitment to ensuring fair, equitable, and economically sustainable conditions for workers across the Cayman Islands. I would also like to take this opportunity to accept the final report of the Minimum Wage Advisory Committee. I was informed that our previous government did not accept the final findings. I want to thank Mr. Lemuel Hurlston and certainly all members of the committee and anyone who've contributed to the document. I would like to thank them personally on behalf of our coalition government. Our government has accepted this, and I want to publicly do so today. The committee's work conducted throughout 2023 focused on several core objectives. One, assessing whether the existing $6 wage still met basic living needs. Two, gathering data from the public, employers, and social support systems. Three, producing a balanced, consensus-driven set of recommendations. The government is using the minimum wage not as a symbolic gesture, but as a tool to uplift individuals and families in real, tangible ways. This decision is about more than numbers. It's about pulling our people out of poverty and into the middle class. It's about ensuring that hard work results in basic economic security and dignity. It's about ensuring that our guest workers are compensated fairly and having the financial ability to afford to live in our country. It's about ensuring our people are paid a fair wage to qualify for mortgages. It's about ensuring that our people can afford basic living expenses such as food, healthcare, and utilities, and they often don't have to make a choice in between who pays for what. I've heard the arguments from political pundits who have said that the minimum wage only affects 2,000 Caymanians and only affects 8,000 guest workers. I've heard the arguments that guest workers will now be sending more money home. While I respect the contributions to this debate from all sides, our government is of the opinion and position that we will not allow 10,000 people to continue to live in poverty and not be paid a decent wage. This is simply not okay. Our forefathers built our country from sending money back home to their families while working in other countries. Why would we deny our guest workers who take care of our elderly, our children, our disabled, who clean our homes, who provide security to our homes, commercial buildings, and schools, and who provide janitorial services, landscaping, and construction for our country, be denied the right to earn a decent wage, even if it means they are using it to support their families in their own countries? This is not who we are as a people, and it will not be who we become. Denying our most vulnerable populations the opportunity to live a decent life is simply unacceptable. We're also taking a clear stance on encouraging labor market participation. By raising the wage floor, we're making work more viable and attractive. Alternatively, for those currently receiving financial assistance from the Department of Financial Assistance, where we are now supporting approximately 1,700 families. Furthermore, this aligns with our ongoing work on a national workforce development strategy, which aims to strengthen the Cayman labor force through better access to training, career pathways, and employment opportunities. Raising our minimum wage is one part of a larger vision to build a stronger, more inclusive economy that benefits all who contribute to it. Let me highlight the key elements of the government's decision. 1, implementation of the new $8.75 gross hourly wage, retention of maximum 25% in-kind credit for accommodations and utilities for living household workers, a cap allowing no more than 25% of the minimum wage to be paid via gratuities or commissions. Over the next few months, my ministry will also be exploring additional recommendations from the committee, such as a student minimum wage, which will encourage young Caymanians between the ages of 14 and 17 to begin receiving work experience and on-the-job training. This also includes a phased gratuity reduction in the hospitality industry, which is recommended to take place over the next couple of years. This is not just about numbers, it's about fairness and ensuring that hard work is met with basic economic security. I want to publicly thank the committee chair, Mr. Lemuel Hurlston, and the entire team for their professionalism and thoughtful guidance. I'll now invite Mr. Hurlston to provide a deeper insight into how the committee reached these recommendations. Mr. Hurlston.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. When the committee began its work in January 2023, we knew that the then current $6 minimum wage that was set in 2016 no longer aligned with the economic realities facing Caymanians and residents. Our process was built on consultation, consensus, and credibility. We held 37 meetings, reviewed data from the Economic and Statistics Department, heard from civil society, businesses, and government agencies, and received over 10,000 public contributions via town halls, surveys, and written feedback. A few key points informed our recommendations for $8.75 per hour as the minimum wage. Most households supported a figure closer to $10 per hour. Businesses proposed figures slightly below $9 per hour. Economic modeling therefore indicated that $8.75 was a feasible compromise, providing meaningful relief to workers without unduly burdening employers. As the minister just said, we deliberately included flexible mechanisms such as in-kind credits for accommodation and utilities in households for household employment, a cap on the role of gratuities on or commission-based pay, and a proposed adjustment mechanism for future wage reviews tied to inflation every 2 years, avoiding the need to convene a full committee each time. While the government has accepted several core recommendations, we encourage continued focus on the remaining recommendations, especially those that improve transparency, predictability, and long-term fairness in the system. It has been my honor to serve in this capacity, and I thank all stakeholders for their engagement and shared commitment.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lemuel Hurlston and the Honorable Minister Michael Miles. Now we go to Mr. Adolphus Ledlow, the Director of the Economics and Statistics Office.
Thank you, Ms. Charles. My comments today will focus mainly on the role that the Economics and Statistics Office played on the committee. And it's basically twofold. One fold was the provision of the data, and the other component of it was the analysis of the data and the likely economic impact of a minimum wage. The committee was established as a tripartite committee. What does that mean is essentially that there were employers representative on one end of the table, there were employee representative on the other end of the table, and there were independent members acting as mediators, though with the ability to vote and the different issues. So our role as from the Economic Statistics Office was to set the parameters of the minimum wage. The first parameter we looked at was that the poverty indicator. So we calculated what we deem to be a poverty number, below which people will be driven into poverty. That figure was essentially set at $6.44 based on economic analysis. We also look at the upper threshold, which we call the ability to pay threshold, whereby we wanted to make sure that small businesses are not impacted in a negative way that that jeopardize their economic viability in a sense. So we set the parameters, $6.44 on one end and $9 on the upper end, and then the committee negotiate as to what's the best place for the minimum wage to sit. And in the committee's deliberation, $8.75 was the agreed upon figure. Now, our role continued with assessing what's the impact of that $8.75 on the local economy. Who are the beneficiaries? The beneficiaries essentially at approximately 10,400 employees, of which 8,000 were from businesses and another 2,400 from households. Just about 8,000 were non-Caymanians, and another 2,000 were 2,400 or so were Caymanians. Now, in addition to those persons, those are the direct beneficiaries. We also have indirect beneficiaries, because currently we'll have people who are working close to the $8.75. And as a result of that, they are likely to see their wages pushed up if the minimum wage is now set at $8.75. So approximately 2,200 to 2,500 persons will benefit in an indirect way from the imposition of an $8.75 minimum wage. Now, the total costs we estimated, and this is using data from 2023, we estimate approximately $51.1 million annually, of which businesses will be responsible for about $39 million, and another 13 million or so will come from households. Now, who are the industries most affected? So we see that employees of households, you're talking about domestic helpers, gardeners, and persons who engage in childcare, administrative and support services, security guards, janitorial, cleaning services, rental workers, things of that persons of that nature. We also had other services, which will include hairdressers, barbers, beauty parlor workers, pet care services, washing and dry cleaning services, in addition to accommodation establishment and restaurants and fast food establishments also. Now, if we want to look at in terms of the businesses, if we define small business as having 10 employees or less, then those persons will be responsible for about $17.9 million because they employ approximately those persons equivalent to about 3,500 of the 10,400 persons will be affected. Households impact would be for 2,400, and as we know, just about 95% of all household employees are non-Caymanians. And the other 5%, quite obviously, are Caymanians. Now, the impact of the minimum wage on the economy in terms of employment. One of the things we did as part of the committee is to conduct surveys asking businesses in these industries, what are your likely response should there be a minimum wage of $1 increase, $2 increase, $3 increase, etc. And businesses give us an idea as to what their likely response would be. And overwhelmingly, businesses said that if it's greater than $3, then they will definitely lay off workers. So the minimum wage is actually set at $8.75, which is below the $3 threshold that most businesses said. In calculating the impact of that, we calculate to about 700 unemployed persons as a result, which would be predominantly work permit holders. But a more realistic analysis was done outside of the survey internally from the ESO, and we think that if any unemployment, it will be less than 200 persons, given the economic climate. In terms of the impact on gross domestic product, because of the additional spending of that $51 million or so, we expect the GDP to increase by 0.9%. So in other words, there is a net expansion as a result of the additional spending. Now we can postulate as to what people are going to do with their money, as the minister alluded, but I'm not going to get into who spend the money how. In terms of inflation, we also at the ESO estimated that inflation will be a one-time jump, about 3.1% increase in inflation. But this is on the proviso that every business increase the minimum at the same time. And we know it's not practical for all businesses affected to pass on the entire cost. Depending on the industry, they're going to take different time frame to pass on some or all of the costs. The businesses who are likely to pass on the costs are the personal services, the hairdressers, the barbers, and we've had them at the top of the list. They're likely to pass on the cost faster than any of the other businesses. Administrative and support services, security guards, janitorial services, they're likely to pass on the costs to their consumers faster. Agricultural products and restaurants. Those are the ones we surmise will pass on the costs fastest. I think I've given you a summary or some points as to what the report entails, but all the other details can be read from the report directly.
Thank you, Mr. Ludlow. And now we go to Ms. Danielle Roberts, the Acting Chief Officer for the Caymanian Employment and Immigration Ministry.
Thank you, Ms. Charles. As we move forward with the implementation of the $8.75 per hour minimum wage, the ministry's primary focus is now on compliance, enforcement, and supporting all stakeholders through this transition. I want to be very clear, this is not a suggestion. It is a new legal minimum standard for wages in the Cayman Islands, and all employers, regardless of sector, are expected to review their payroll practices and ensure they are in full compliance by 1st of January 2026. To support this, the Department of Labor and Pensions, DLP, will be issuing clear, accessible guidance materials, including industry-specific examples, frequently asked questions, and employer checklists over the coming weeks. We will launch public education campaigns to ensure that employees are aware of their rights and how to report violations confidentially. Non-compliance will not be taken lightly. Employers found to be underpaying staff will face penalties, back pay orders, and possible prosecution where necessary. We're also working with DLP to ensure that our grievance channels are easy to access and that every report is followed up in a timely and fair manner. Beyond enforcement, this is also a moment for positive change. We're calling on employers to not simply meet the minimum wage, but to look at how they support, train, and retain staff in ways that build long-term value for their businesses and for our economy. Finally, our internal working group will continue to evaluate additional committee recommendations, which can be read in full in the Minimum Wage Advisory Committee report. I again want to thank our enforcement teams, the ministry and DLP staff, the 2023 Minimum Wage Advisory Committee members, and the stakeholders who continue to collaborate with us to ensure that this process is effective, transparent, and sustained. We are committed to seeing this through and to building a labor market that works for everyone. Thank you again, and we will defer to the moderator now for questions at this time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Roberts. We now open to the media for questions. Remember, to those of you who are watching online, you can always put your questions into the chat and we will take them on. I will now recognize the media member from the Caymanian Times.
Change of plan there. Thanks, Rob. Wendy from Cayman News Service. Hello, everyone. I have a few questions. Can you explain why you made the decision to go with the 25% in kind, especially as there's such a big difference to say someone who's earning minimum wage and working at somewhere like the Ritz and getting their salary made up partly from the tips, they're still going to end up with additional money because of the tip pool being so great, the gratuities being so great because the service charge is so big. To say compared to a deckhand who's more likely to be Caymanian working on a boat who gets $50 tip after the day's work, then his boss can just take that $50 and that's his pay for the day. It's kind of, it feels a little unfair. So I'd like to understand the thinking behind sticking with this idea. I understand it is certainly in terms of domestic workers and the when they're living in, not questioning that. I'm really talking about the taking the tips from people that it may get a cash tip and then they're going to lose it to get their salary.
I'm not sure I'm understanding, because the position at the moment is that there's a 25% allowance for commission-based employees, as well as 25% for live-in domestics. So you're carving out something that is not specific in terms of a sector.
Well, I think if I remember rightly, in this report, you recommended not doing it this time, that we should go back to everybody gets $8.75. And then if you get tips or gratuities or commissions or whatever, that's all on top. Except for, obviously, we understand with in-kind, sort of over the roof over your head is a different thing to a tip or a commission.
Yeah. All I'm saying is that we have not created a class of individuals. We have not identified a group of individuals such as you're describing. There may be such individuals in the employment market, but we have not identified them specifically in our report.
Okay, so you don't see that there will be an issue with that, that there is an inherent unfairness in that situation of somebody working for a large corporation and having their salary part with tips to somebody working in a very small one.
I don't see any inherent fairness in that at all. Where I see unfairness, inherent unfairness, is people having to wait 8 years for any adjustment at all in their wages. That is inherently unfair.
Can I just also add to that? You mentioned two different things, so I just want to acknowledge that they are two different things. You mentioned gratuities and you mentioned tips. Businesses who have approved gratuity schemes through the Department of Labor and Pensions can use 25% gratuities to make up the minimum wage, which is now moving from $6 to $8.75. If your business has an approved gratuity scheme, that carve-out remains. At this time, we're not making any announcements about removing the ability to use gratuities to make up that minimum. And we're not talking about removing gratuities at all for any reason. But it is a recommendation from the committee to phase out that ability to use gratuities to contribute to that minimum going forward, but that's not an announcement being made today.
Okay, but
But-
it is a planned phase out.
It is something that came in the recommendations from the committee that the ministry is supporting the minister in finding a reasonable way forward in how to do that.
Okay, great.
Tips, just for the avoidance of doubt, are different. There's no legislation or anything around tips.
Oh, okay, so a boat captain couldn't do that then?
Right.
He couldn't just take
You couldn't take the gratuities.
like a cash
No.
tip that a deckhand got? Oh, okay,
No.
cool. That's, I didn't know that. I thought it was
Sure.
all part of the thing. The other question that I'd like to ask is you spoke about enforcement, and obviously this is going to, enforcement has always been one of the issues for work and Department of Labour and Pensions. It's a headcount issue. We're obviously facing a challenging budget this year. What kind of additional investment do you foresee in terms of headcount to be able to enforce it?
The ministry and our coalition government has agreed that work, DLP, and our resources at the ministry has to be put in the forefront of what we do over the next 4 years. In our broad outcomes, education and our ministry are perhaps going to be focused on. Our responsibility now is to regroup with, and this is what we are having discussions with our Department of Labor and Pensions and our Department of Immigration to see what resources they need. They have been heavily understaffed. Our responsibility now is to upskill, reskill, and to employ the necessary personnel in order to carry out all of the legislation that we're bringing in. So, DLP is also bringing in legislation. We currently have legislation in the books for work, which will be introduced in probably in September, as early as September. So we are looking at all of what their requirements are in order to move that forward as soon as possible. And yes, there are budget shortages, but we do make $1 billion a year.
Do you have a rough idea about how much more the budget's going to go up? Like
I,
what sort of percentage rate?
I don't want to speculate. That's something that our coalition government is working on now. The Minister of Finance and his team has been reviewing all of that. We are looking at all of our budgets because ultimately it's not going to be equitable across the board where every single ministry gets the same budget. It has to now come down to prioritizing Caymanians. All of us ran on the ticket of prioritizing Caymanians, and that's what we plan to do. And a major part of that right now is fixing immigration, making sure that our people are employed, and ensuring that the Department of Labor has the resources to enforce laws.
Thank you. The other question I have really is about the inflation issues, because obviously we're 2 years on from when you arrived at the 875, and since then inflation's probably run accumulatively around 4% since then.
Right.
So any thoughts on making it 9?
No, not right now. I think people are often seduced by the word inflation. Former government provided significant increases to all civil servants because they felt that it was unjust for our civil servants to be earning less than $3,000 a month. And yet the press then go off saying the price of bread is going to go up by $50. What I'm often taken back on is we would allow people to live in squalor and not have a blink of an eye that they could be earning more, that we should be paying them a fair wage. We've also upped everyone in the civil service by providing them a 5% COLA. None of this stuff was budgeted for. Yet, again, no one talked about inflation. When I sit down and I speak with a number of young Caymanians that are being taken advantage of, and our guest workers as well, I'm appalled. I'm appalled that we have grown accustomed to devaluing people. And the majority of these people that we are devaluing are women, because the majority of those folks are domestic helpers. They are on the front line of everything of what we do. And yet we consider them less than. Why? A country that has almost 120 churches and we profess to be a Christian community, we argue about trivial things about raising someone's pay by $2 and change.
Yeah, I mean,
And-
that's what I'm asking. I'm not asking for, I'm not saying about it causing inflation. I'm
No.
saying it's already subject to inflation, the 875 figure. and
I know I'm making
the-
a statement because this is deliver, and I'm happy, Wendy, that you asked that question, because I want to make sure that people have a clear understanding what we are debating. Like I get a lot of those, not a lot, but I get it from a number of a small group of people who think that it's unjust to keep 10,000 people in poverty. And yes, it should be 9. We're behind the 8 ball here,
Yeah,
right? This thing should have come in from 2023. The
Yeah.
last government have
so we
kicked
should
this
already
down the
be
road.
doing the 2025
We
review, shouldn't we?
absolutely should.
So
right?
that leads to the question, if we haven't done, are we going to do that now? Are we already going to start the review
I think
for an increase?
what our government is prepared to do is start, right? And the start right now is January 1st. And what I like about the report and the work that Mr. Hurlson and his team have done is that I don't need to call another minimum wage committee to tweak minimum wage. We can speak to Mr.
Yeah.
Ledlow and his team to look at where inflation has gone up, and it already has it in the minimum wage advisory report. We can then tweak the minimum wage as we have cost of living that will go up occasionally, right? So we want to move that on as quickly as possible, because what I don't want to do is spend another 8 years discussing minimum wage when we could just be moving it up as the cost of living or any other inflationary things go up.
Okay, great.
I'm going to interject because of time. We were asking for a limit of 2 to 3 questions.
All right, okay, sorry.
And,
If there's time at the end, I've got something about the Labour report, so it's slightly different in any event. So it's for Mr. Adolph. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Yes. Ralph Lewis, German Times. First of all, I want to welcome you, Mr. Minister,
Thank you, sir.
to the press briefings, and thank Lehman's team for such a good job. I have two questions, and the first one is there any plans from the government to make any adjustments to any other mechanism to offset the pending increase in expenses that will come from this?
Such as,
Maybe salary wages increase, or maybe tax reduction. due to the non-fuel,
great,
those kind of-
it's, Ralph, absolutely great question. We've just given over 4,000 civil servants an increase, right? We have a lot of spending power, a lot of buying power at this point in time within the government. We provide 100% subsidized support through the Department of Financial Assistance. We are consistently subsidizing school lunches. We are subsidizing our bus attendance during the summer. We've provided a number of different subsidy already. The goal right now is to upskill people. I don't want Caymanians to settle for a minimum wage. I want to make sure that our people are even higher than a minimum wage. And I think, based on what Mr. Ledlow's sort of calculations of where employers are coming in at, is that the majority of employers are paying higher than the minimum wage already. Yes, I understand. We're always going to have, some organization that are going to struggle. Listen, I'm willing to sit down with anyone and figure out ways on how to help those folks. We're going to have a single mom who's doing the best she possibly can that may struggle with childcare. But what I'm not going to have is a person living in squalor in our country. We need to help the single mom. And I'm willing to have those conversations on how she can afford childcare. But I can't allow her or a family to have a person live in squalor because they simply can only pay a person $6 an hour.
And the next question is, and something that to your heart and mine as well. We are speaking about a minimum wage, increase the minimum wage. there is another topic that is not being touched on a lot, and it's financial literacy.
Sure.
You can increase my salary by maybe $3.
Yeah.
It may not impact me very much, but there's another equation there. How do I spend that increase in my salary? What do I do with the money I'm going to get in? And this is, I think, something that we should focus on. Do you have any comment on that?
Absolutely. You know, in my former life and training, one of the things that we did quite a bit was help young people, in particular young people that walk through our doors, was understand, now that you have a job, what are you going to do with your money? We don't do enough of that in our school system. And it's one of the areas that Mr. Anglin and I have discussed quite a bit. We've removed almost gutted life skills in our school system. Yet when a young person graduates from high school, we expect them to know how to purchase land or a house. We expect them to know how to go to the bank. We expect them to know about credit cards. We expect them to be able to manage themselves financially. But at no time, we've actually taught them how to open up a bank account. I have young people that I've met up to 25, 30, 35 years old that have never actually opened up a bank account because no one has actually taught them, right? We have to start to now look at these small life skills programs that go a long way. You know, so we're having a lot of things roll out through WRC, our ministry, and DLP to start educating people. The one thing that I want to do within the ministry is communicate better, communicate what we're doing and how we're doing it, and get feedback from the community on what other needs are out there. So I have my communications manager rolling up a number of different communications to go out to the community, from career development to, you know, things. And if my employer is mistreating me, how and what can I do in order to manage that as well? We don't do enough and we need to do more.
I have one more question. I can ask Mr. Laidlaw. In your group sessions, did you hear any concerns about having to adjust other employees' salaries who are already above the minimum wage? For example, if I'm a supervisor with staff at a minimum wage, now they've increased to my level, is my employer going to increase my salary as well? Have you had that concern?
Yes, we had a few comments during our deliberations with members of the public. Some employees actually claim that the employer did not push their salary up the last time when it was they were already earning $6. I think it's a matter for the specific business to basically value the employee and the skill, because higher skill supposed to be remunerated higher with higher pay. And if somebody was already earning the minimum wage, then there was a reason the employee was earning that minimum wage. Meaning, if somebody's earning $8.75 already, when the minimum wage is $6, then there's a reason. It could have been years of experience, some aspect of skill. So we will expect businesses to then take those increases. And that's one of the considerations we did. And we estimate that will earn another $15 million or so in pushing employees who are earning the current minimum wage, the current the $8.75 higher to supervisory or whatever it is position.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Cayman Compass.
Hello, Raymond Saney from the Cayman Compass. Minister, that's a rise from $6 in 2016 to $8.75 in 2026. That's basically 9 years. That's about 31.5 cents a year of an increase. Even if it goes up, it's still behind Bermuda, Luxembourg, Hong Kong, Jersey. I mean, how long is it going to be before Cayman matches similar jurisdictions?
You know, that's a great point. I can tell you if I was in the government 4 years ago, it would probably have been more. But I'm here now and my team is here now. Our government is certainly looking at that, and that's why, you know, I was happy that the Minimum Wage Advisory Committee actually put already a fix on a regular basis that as inflation goes up, the minimum wage goes up. But I want to get something, I want to make sure that we are going a little bit deeper. it is a start. The goal is let's upskill our people so they're not surviving on minimum wage. An employer should be paying them more than that. So therefore, when cost of living goes up or whatever inflationary things go up, our folks have buying power. And that's what we are going to be doing over the next 4 years is upskilling Caymanians so they don't have to start at minimum wage or they don't have to take simply just entry level position, but they can come above that entry level position and actually make a true livable wage, right? I know we went back and forth and I saw it in the report. I actually read the 2015 report as well, that we went back and forth about a minimum wage or a livable wage, right? And I don't want to have that debate today, but at the end of the day, we have to start to train our people to take jobs that are providing them a livable wage in our country.
Okay. Do you know how much a carton of milk is?
I don't buy milk, but I think it's about $5-6 a half a gallon or something now.
No, but
The last time I went to the store, it's
tin of
about that.
beans, tin of Bush's beans.
I don't know. I don't buy that. So it's not something that I purchase, but I'm sure that it is something that regardless if we have a minimum wage, it's always going to go up.
Thank you, Minister.
Yeah.
Thank you. We will be going to the questions that have been asked online in just a few moments, but I'm first going to ask if there is a member of media who has not yet asked any question at all, if they would like to do so now, if there's a member of media who has not yet asked any question.
Hello, Philip Richter from Compass TV. My first question is, how will an $8.75 an hour wage impact small businesses compared to large businesses?
Well, in terms of let me first of all say, at the time of this analysis, what we noticed already is that in the recent data, which would have been in the fall of 2024, there are less persons now will benefit from this $8.75 minimum wage, which simply means that businesses have already, those who are below $8.75 have already start acting and make good and the $8.75. So for example, in this analysis, we had just about 10,000 plus. At the data we look at the end of last year, we're down to 8,000 total persons who are below this $8.75. So we are seeing that businesses are increasing. Now, minimum wage will not affect every business the same way. It depends on how far you are how far away you are below that $8.75. So if a large business, as in what we call large, maybe a lot of employees, are only paying $6, then they have to now make up $2.75 for every employee per hour. Whereas you may have a small business that have 10 employees that may be closer to that $8.75. So it varies based on the business and the way they value their employees. Now, if we go back to the concept of a minimum wage, it is simply saying what you're paying an employee that you can just train in a few weeks. An employee that need no special skill. That's essentially what a minimum wage should be. But a person going into an organization with skills should be remunerated based on their skill level. So it should not be that the government, you say, well, the government said your pay is $8.75. It should be based on the skill of that employee and not because there's a minimum that you stick to the minimum. So you can find some large businesses that, paying well, or you can find some of them that are paying exactly the existing minimum wage of $6.
The minimum wage report recommends a minimum wage of $6 per hour for 12 to 17-year-olds to encourage the youth to get into the workforce. Will you be onboarding this recommendation?
It is strongly being considered. Part of this process right now is a partnership that we are establishing with the Ministry of Education, because our goal right now is to start to look at the employment that our young people need to get into. We're starting far too late in the game when it comes to career paths. That has to be earlier. The rest of the world has moved on. The rest of the world are starting conversations from the time the child is 10, 11 years old. We can't afford to start when they get to SciFec and they're 17, 18. So we have to start earlier. And the goal for us in the ministry is to launch a national apprenticeship program. So a lot of those young people have to be part of that process to where, whether it's government or whether it's private sector, we need to start to get young people in employment faster to learn those skills and to certainly have on-the-job training. I mean, I started working when I was 13. I was in construction. I learned a lot. I learned how to show up on time, right? I learned how to, manage money. A lot of these small skills we're not teaching anymore, and we need to get back to the basics of that.
My last question is, how has your administration taken into the account the potential impact on the cost of living?
As I, mentioned earlier, the cost of living is always going to go up. I can't control the cost of living. What I want to do is manage how our people live. And right now, everything that has been dictated in the last 20 years has been, we can't put in a minimum wage because it's going to affect the cost of living. Well, I mean, Adolphus can tell you that the cost of living has consistently gone up. So obviously a minimum wage has nothing to do with the cost of living because it's going to go up. It is going to go up because we are a consumer-driven society. So anything that happens around the world, a war starts, a president is elected in the US, creates cost of living, the price of gas or oil, right? All of that affects our cost of living, and I can't control that part. But what I can control is the folks that are coming into our country that are living in squalor, the single mom or the two-parent home that are surviving this. We should be able to put in a minimum wage where people cannot pay them below that because it's poverty. What we are now doing is importing poverty, and our government will no longer allow that to happen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We now will go to a question that we have from our online viewers. The question is, currently restaurant staff have a minimum wage of $4.50 CI because of gratuities. Are there any changes on that? Mr. Holston or?
I can take that one.
Done,
Yes. Yes. Restaurants are, all businesses are expected to comply. So as of right now, businesses with an approved gratuity scheme don't pay outright $6. They pay $4.50 out of their kitty, and they are allowed to use gratuities to make up the additional amount of $1.50 to ensure that their employee meets the minimum wage of $6. That ability to use the 25% allowance will continue, but those numbers are changed. So as of the 1st of January, we won't be talking about $4.50 to $6. We will be talking about $6.56 to get to $8.75. So we are, it's the principle is the same, but the base that the business is going to have to find themselves is increasing in alignment with minimum wage.
Thank you very much, Ms. Roberts. Do we have any other questions? Any final questions from the media? Okay, one more from Cayman News Service.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's because the Labour Force survey came out, and I'm kind of interested because it looks like there's some new numbers that were very interesting, which is the birthplace and how many people have come here, which I think you'll all see. Something like 50% of our population came in the last 15 years. So obviously there's quite a lot of questions that spring out from that. I don't know whether you're going to have another press conference on that at some point, but one of the questions that I want to ask is basically how we're looking at unemployment here, because from what you said earlier about needs assessment unit with 1,700 families being assisted in some way. So there's at least one adult that's obviously not working in those circumstances almost exclusively.
Or that's working and
on
cannot
various-
afford to live.
But you're
cannot
also,
afford-
are those people being counted in the labor force as unemployed? So people who are on needs assessment, and I'm talking in particular financial assistance, permanent financial assistance, are they counted in the labour force at the moment or not? Because it suggests to me that otherwise, in actual fact, local unemployment is considerably higher than the labour force has said, if that is the case.
According to DFA, the new DFA laws, all persons that are drawing some level of financial assistance that are able-bodied must register with WRC now. So that's part of the legislation, the new legislation that was passed a couple of years ago. What we are trying to do within the ministry is look at how we manage our labor pool. For instance, government has always been very siloed. We have a training program at UCCI that provides TVET training. We have the same training program at PWD that also provides training. None of those young people that's in either of those programs are part of one database. So if I am looking for plumbers, I have no clue how many plumbers are actually being developed. What we are doing in the ministry is we are now setting up relationships with the Ministry of Education, because we have to know everyone that has a scholarship in the Cayman Islands. Right now, that information is only kept by education through the Education Secretariat. Well, we have the Grand Hyatt that's coming online. We have one GT that's coming online. Between just those two hotels, they need over 750 people. How do I know how to fill that labor pool? I don't, because all of the stats is in various different departments. So what I've said to all of the players in the system, I need all of that information drawn into one. So when myself and my DCO and my chief officer and our team is sitting down to look at what projects are coming online, we know where we're pulling that labor pool from and what skills is going to be needed. So if Adolfo says to me tomorrow, hey, we have this project that's coming online, I can go to our labor pool and say, okay, we have 100 electricians that's sitting there. We have X, we have Y. Currently, we cannot do that. And we are going to be doing that over the next year, because I find it very strange that a kid could get off a plane after going to school for 4.5 years, possibly getting a master's degree, come back to Cayman, and they cannot find a job in our country, whether it's within government or outside. I think it's shameful. We need to change that. So that's what I'm working on now. National labor pool, a national database. We have to put a human capital plan in place, because without that, there's no guide. We've done a lot of sketchy different plans, but it has never been drawn into, this is what everyone's going to stick to, and let's move it forward. So we have a task force that we're bringing together from outside of government, within the private sector, and a team in government that's going to be helping put that together to develop that human capital plan. And then we need a national apprenticeship program that any student in any school, whether that's from overseas to local, they have to go into that database so we know who's looking for a job, the courses that they've taken or the degrees that they've gotten, the experience that they've gotten. So any project that's being laid down in this country, I can go to that database along with the team and understand who we can pull immediately for jobs. Right now, as I said, that doesn't exist, and we have to create that.
So effectively what you're saying is that figure, the figure that we're looking at for the unemployed is perhaps,
It is
it's not
not
really much
accurate.
use to us at the moment.
It's not accurate, and it never is going to be accurate, because we have people who can't get onto the website, who don't have a computer, who don't have this, who don't have that. We have to make sure that we're giving people better access, and the access is easier. We also have to make sure that when we are laying projects down in our country, we're not giving away millions of dollars in concessions without tying those projects to ensuring that our labor pool is being developed. Like, I'm tired of seeing millions of dollars in concessions to multi-billionaire or multi-billion-dollar projects. And then we are having to give them hundreds of work permits because we failed to plan as a government, or we failed to force them to put a plan in place in order to produce that labor once that project is finished or even started.
Wendy, also just to add to what the minister is saying, in terms of a technicality of what we define unemployment to be from the ESO perspective. First of all, we follow international standards in the definition of unemployment. And there must be 3 conditions for you to be considered unemployed. The first condition is that the individual must not be working. 2, the individual must be actively seeking a job. And 3, the individual must be available for that job. And the 3 of them must come together, and those are the persons we consider unemployed.
So that might be the case why quite a few people on needs
So-
assessment might
so
not
for
be counted
example-
because they're not available because they don't have childcare or they don't have
Right.
an ability to
So
go to
it's
work. Right,
possible that
okay.
you may not be, even if a job turn up at your doorstep tomorrow, you may not be able to take it.
Yeah.
Correct.
We don't consider those persons to be unemployed.
And that's a growing
Okay, so
population.
they're not really counted in what you call the labor force, right?
They are counted as part of, they could be counted as part of the labor force,
But not actively seeking.
not actively seeking. So they are basic, well, they're what they call not in the labor force section.
Okay,
But the other component is that the universe is everybody who's not working, which
yes,
some of the persons will be in that universe.
Yeah.
Who is not working, but unless they're seeking and they're available, they would not be considered as.
I just think it's
unemployed.
important for people to understand because I think they see a figure of like around 1,100 unemployed Caymanians and they think that that's nothing. But if there's like another 1,000 sitting around because they can't work even though they want to, then we need to be realistic about actually how many of
Well,
our people are
Right,
not.
but there is. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, you're talking about almost what 250, 280 kids just graduated from SciFac.
Yeah.
They just went to UCCI's graduation. That's another 315 or so was what I
Yeah.
was told. I went to ICCI's graduation, and then you have a lot of children, a lot of young people that are overseas. I am getting calls regularly from parents, students about they're coming home and what's the plan, right? We are failing these young people because we have never put a plan in place. We're giving them a lot of money. Our government spends, guys, an upwards of about $30 million plus. That's just the Cayman Islands government. Then you have a lot of corporations who have to produce at least one scholarship, you know, for Caymanians to be trained up. So we are looking, let's say grossly at about $40 million that's floating around in our country on any given year when it comes to scholarships. However, when those young people now get their education and they come back, they're sorely disappointed. Why? We haven't planned, right? Or much worse, we've provided so many concessions that we have so many foreign workers in our country that they've been competed against, right? They can't, they're not coming home to a job. So what we have is a lot of talent that's in other countries that are Caymanians. We can't have that anymore. Hence the reason why we partner with the civil service and we ushered in term limits here, succession training, because that also goes to a lot of our reforms as a coalition, right? So we're doing this in part and parcel as well. What we are doing is tearing walls down. We are ensuring that silos are being brought down to its knees because it is now at a detriment level that young people are to a point where they do not want to come back to our country. And I find that shameful. So we have to do it different. And that's why I'm doing this a lot different. The minimum wage is just one aspect of it. There's a lot of different things that we're now putting into this as well. And the goal is to join with, you know, everyone to say, if this is a problem, let's fix it.
And with that note on joining with everyone, I want to say thank you to our panelists, the Honorable Michael Miles, Minister for Cayman Employment and Immigration, Mr. Lemuel Hurlston, Mr. Adolphus Ledlau, and Ms. Danielle Roberts. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember to stay tuned to the latest government news, like, share, and subscribe. Have a great afternoon.